Welcome back to Lena's Romantasy Collection. If you love the fake dating trope but wish the boyfriend was a little more growly, then you are going to be obsessed with today's story. We have a broke heroine, a snobby family, and an alpha king who decides that fake dating isn't enough for him. Trust me, the way he handles her ex-boyfriend is satisfying on a spiritual level. Do me a favor, if you want more possessive alphas in Suits, smash that like button right now. And if you're new, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next upload. Now, let's see what happens when you accidentally hire a king for 500 bucks.
I did something desperate. With my sister's wedding approaching and my mother's criticism ringing in my ears, I needed a shield. So I walked into a dive bar and hired the scariest, biggest mechanic I could find. I paid him $500. I gave him 3 rules. 1. Don't talk too much. 2. Don't touch me. 3. Pretend you're obsessed with me for 48 hours. I thought I was hiring a fake date to annoy my snobby ex. I was wrong. I didn't hire a mechanic. I hired the alpha king of the deadliest cack in the city. And when the 48 hours were up, he didn't want the money. He locked the door, looked me in the eye, and whispered, "You paid for an obsession, Cleo, and I never leave a job unfinished." This is the story of how I tried to fake a relationship and accidentally started a war.
Chapter 1. The cold was the kind that settled in your morrow, heavy and aching. 3 years ago, on a night just like this, I had found him. I was walking home from a late shift at the design firm, back when I still had a steady paycheck and hope for my career. The alley behind my apartment was usually empty, a shortcut I shouldn't have taken, but I was tired. Then I saw the heap of black fur in the snow. It wasn't a dog. It was too big, too wild. A wolf, or the biggest stray I had ever seen. He was bleeding. A jagged gash ran down his flank, staining the pristine white snow crimson. He was shivering so violently his teeth chattered. Any sane person would have run. I should have run. Instead, I knelt. "Hey there, buddy," I whispered, my breath pluming in the freezing air. "You look like you've had a rough night." The beast opened one eye. It was gold, piercing, intelligent, and filled with pain. He didn't growl, he just looked at me with a resignation that broke my heart. I didn't have much. I had my lunch for the next day, a ham sandwich on rye, and the expensive wool shawl my grandmother had left me. It was the only nice thing I owned. I unwrapped the sandwich and placed it near his nose. He ate it in one bite, desperate and starving. "That's all I got," I murmured. He was still shivering. Without thinking, I unwound the shawl from my neck. It was thick, gray wool, warm and soft. I draped it over him, tucking the ends under his massive, trembling body. "Keep it," I told him, patting his head. "Stay warm." I walked away shivering, wearing nothing but a thin coat. When I came back the next morning to check on him, he was gone. The shawl was gone too. I thought he was just a stray dog I'd helped. I didn't know I had just saved the king of the Onyx Ridge pack. And I certainly didn't know that act of kindness had marked me. Present day. "Cleo, are you even listening?" I snapped back to reality. The cold alley was gone, replaced by the suffocating scent of lilies and expensive perfume. I was at the rehearsal dinner for my younger sister, Tilly. Tilly was glowing. She was 24, blonde, perfect, and marrying a dermatologist named Chad. "I'm listening," I lied, stabbing a piece of dry chicken with my fork. "Good," Tilly beamed, looking around the table at her bridesmaids, all of whom were 22 and size zeros. "Because I was saying, maybe you shouldn't walk down the aisle, Cleo. You could just manage the guest book." My mother nodded in agreement. "It might be better, dear. You know, visually.
standing next to these fresh-faced girls. It just highlights that you're old, I supplied, my grip on the fork tightening. I'm 32, Mom, not a fossil. In bridal years, that's ancient till... And you're still single. It's just sad. Everyone asks about it. Why is Cleo alone? Is she barren? Is she difficult? The table went quiet. Chad looked uncomfortable. My pride, which had been taking a beating for years, finally snapped. I'm not alone, I blurted. Tilly blinked. What? I'm not single, I said, my voice rising. I have a boyfriend. We've been dating for months. He's amazing. He's big, strong, very masculine. My mother's eyes narrowed. You've never mentioned him. We're private, I lied smoothly. But he's coming to the wedding tomorrow. You'll meet him then. Silence. Then Tilly smirked. Okay, Cleo, if he exists, bring him. But if you show up alone again, you're manning the guest book.
I was a dead woman walking. As soon as the dinner ended, I sprinted to my car and had a panic attack in the parking lot. I didn't have a boyfriend. My last boyfriend was Preston, the investment banker who dumped me on my 30th birthday because I didn't fit his trajectory. Since then, my love life had been a series of dates with men who wanted a mother, not a partner. I need a man, I whispered to the steering wheel. I need a large, scary, convincing man. In 12 hours. I drove to the only place open at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, the Rusty Sprocket. It was a biker bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where the floor was sticky and the men looked like they chewed glass for fun. I walked in, clutching my purse. I was wearing a floral dress from the rehearsal dinner, looking like a lost librarian. I scanned the room. Too drunk, too old, too incarcerated. Then I saw him. He was outside the back door, visible through the window, working on a massive motorcycle. He was enormous. He wore a grease-stained gray t-shirt that strained against muscles that looked carved from granite. He had dark hair that fell into his eyes, a shadow of stubble on a square jaw, and a stillness about him that screamed danger. He looked like he could snap a pool cue with 2 fingers. Perfect, I breathed. I marched outside. The air smelled of gasoline and rain. Excuse me, I called. The man didn't jump. He turned slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. When he looked at me, my breath hitched. His eyes were storm gray, rimmed with a strange golden fleck. They were intense, unsettling, and they widened just a fraction when they landed on me. He stood up. He kept standing. He towered over me, at least 6'5". Can I help you? His voice was deep, a rumble that I felt in the soles of my feet. I have a business proposition, I said, trying to sound like a confident interior designer and not a desperate spinster. I need a man. I need a large, scary, convincing man. In 12 hours. He tilted his head, looking me up and down. He didn't look at my legs or my chest. He looked at my face. He looked amused? What kind of service? I need you to be my boyfriend for 48 hours, starting tomorrow morning. Thorne Blackwood, king of the Onyx Ridge Pack, owner of half the real estate in the city and the most lethal predator on the continent, looked at the tiny human woman standing in front of him. He recognized her scent instantly, vanilla and rain. The woman who gave him a ham sandwich, the woman who gave her shawl. He had been watching her from a distance for 3 years, ensuring she was safe, respecting the boundaries between wolves and humans. But now she was here, asking for him. He threw the greasy rag onto a barrel. I'm listening. Chapter 3. I blinked. That was easier than I expected. Okay, I said, fumbling with my purse. Here's the deal. My sister is getting married. My family thinks I'm a tragic spinster who is going to die alone and be eaten by her cats. I lied and told them I have a boyfriend.
I gestured to him. "You look convincing. You look like the kind of guy my mother would be terrified of, which is exactly what I want." He leaned against the brick wall, crossing his massive arms. "You want to scare your mother?" "I want to shock her," I corrected. "I want them to believe that someone like you, someone dangerous and primal, is obsessed with me. I want to retain my dignity." I pulled out an envelope. "I have $500. It's all I have until my next commission check clears. I know it's not much, but..." "Done," he said. I froze. "Done? You didn't even haggle. You don't want to know the hours?" "500 is fine," he said, taking the envelope without counting it. He shoved it into his back pocket. "What are the rules?" "Right, rules." I took a breath. "Rule number 1. You are devoted to me. You can't take your eyes off me. We are madly in love." He nodded slowly. "Devoted. Got it." "Rule number 2, minimal talking. You look rough. No offense. If you open your mouth, they might realize you're a mechanic or a bouncer. So just grunt. Smolder. Look brooding." A corner of his mouth twitched. "Grunt and smolder. I can do that." "Rule number 3, no touching. Well, maybe a hand on the small of my back to guide me, but no kissing. This is a business transaction. I don't want you getting any ideas." He stepped closer. The heat radiating off him was intense. He smelled like motor oil and something earthy, like a forest after a storm. It was intoxicating. "What if I need to sell the lie?" he asked softly, looking down at me. "Improvise," I squeaked, "but keep it PG. My grandmother will be there." "Do you even know my name?" "Thorn," he said simply. "My name is Thorn." Thorn. I tested it. It sounded sharp. Dangerous. "Okay, Thorn. Meet me at the St. Jude's Chapel at 10 a.m. sharp. Wear a suit. If you don't have one, wear the cleanest black shirt you own. And please, scrub the grease off your hands." "I'll see what I can do." I turned to leave, feeling a wave of relief mixed with insanity. I had just hired a stranger from a biker bar to be my date. As I walked to my car, I didn't see Thorn pull a sleek, encrypted smartphone from his pocket. He said, "Basker," into his phone, his voice shifting from the rough mechanic tone to the command of a king. "Cancel my meetings for the next 2 days, and have my black tuxedos sent to the penthouse. The bespoke one."
Chapter 4. The next morning, I was a wreck. I stood outside the chapel in my bridesmaid dress, a hideous, ruffled peach monstrosity that Tilly had sworn was flattering. It wasn't. I looked like a disgruntled salmon. "Please show up," I whispered, checking my watch. "Please don't take the $500 and ghost me." Guests were filing in. My mother was standing by the door, judging everyone's outfits. Tilly was hyperventilating near the altar. "Cleo," Mom called out, her voice dripping with skepticism. "It's 9:55. Where is this mystery man? Did he get lost? Or did you make him up?" "He's coming," I said, sweating. "He works late. He's a contractor." "A contractor," Mom sniffed. "How quaint. Does he own a truck?" "He owns a motorcycle," I muttered. At 10 a.m. exactly, the sound of roaring engines echoed off the church walls. It wasn't the sputtering cough of a beat-up bike. It was the deep, throaty purr of a machine that cost more than a house. Everyone turned. A matte black Ducati pulled up to the curb. The rider cut the engine and kicked the stand down. He swung a leg over the bike and pulled off his black helmet. I stopped breathing. It was Thorn. But it wasn't the grease-stained mechanic I had met last night. He had cleaned up. Oh God, he had cleaned up. His dark hair was styled in a messy, effortless way that looked straight out of a magazine. He was freshly shaven, revealing a jawline so sharp it could cut glass.
But it was the suit that killed me. It was a black tuxedo tailored to perfection. It hugged his broad shoulders and tapered at his waist. The white shirt was crisp, unbuttoned at the collar, showing a hint of tanned skin. He wore sunglasses, looking like a movie star who had taken a wrong turn into suburbia. He hung the helmet on the bike and strode toward me. His walk was a prowl, confident, fluid, predator. My mother's jaw hit the floor. Tilly stopped hyperventilating. My Aunt Linda dropped her program. Thorn walked right up to me, ignoring the staring crowd. He took off his sunglasses, revealing those striking gray-gold eyes. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his voice deep and smooth. Traffic was a nightmare. He didn't look at my mother. He didn't look at the church. He looked at me like I was the only water in a desert. "You," I whispered, "are wearing a tuxedo." "You said wear a suit." He shrugged, a small smirk playing on his lips. I figured I should make an effort. He looked down at my peach dress. I braced myself for a mockery. "You look beautiful." And he sounded terrifyingly sincere.
Chapter 5. "Who is that?" Tilly hissed, appearing at my elbow. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at Thorn with wide, hungry eyes. "That," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I looped my arm through Thorn's, "is Thorn, my boyfriend." Thorn looked down at Tilly. He didn't smile. He gave her a polite, cold nod. "You must be the bride. Cleo has told me so much about you." "She has?" Tilly squeaked. "Yes," Thorn said, his hand covering mine on his arm. His skin was warm, his grip firm and possessive. "She told me you have excellent taste. Though," he glanced at my dress, "I prefer Cleo in blue. It matches her fire." I stepped on his foot. "Subtle," I tried to convey with my eyes. "Be subtle." Thorn ignored me. We walked into the church. The air changed. Usually when I walked into a family event, I felt invisible. Or worse, I felt like a disappointment. But with Thorn beside me, I felt like I was walking with a weapon. People parted for us. The whispers started immediately. Who is he? Is he famous? Look at the way he holds her. We sat in the second pew, reserved for family. Preston was there. Of course he was. My ex-boyfriend was a friend of the groom. He was sitting in the row behind us, wearing a gray suit that probably cost a fortune, looking smug. He saw me and smirked. "Hey, Cleo. Nice dress. Very puffy." Then he saw Thorn. Preston's smirk faltered. He looked at Thorn's tuxedo, then at his own. He looked at Thorn's shoulders, then at his own. "Who's this?" Preston asked, his voice tight. I opened my mouth to introduce him as a contractor, but Thorn beat me to it. He turned in the pew, draping his arm along the back of the seat so it rested protectively behind my head. He looked at Preston with bored, lethal eyes. "I'm the man who replaced you, and judging by the cheap cut of your jacket, I'm an upgrade." Preston turned purple. "I beg your pardon? I have a Harvard MBA. Who are you?" Thorn didn't answer. He just turned back to me, reached up and tucked a loose curl behind my ear. His fingers grazed my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. "Ignore him, love," he whispered, loud enough for Preston to hear. "Don't let the noise distract you." "You're taking this job too seriously," I hissed under my breath, my face burning. "You just insulted a banker." Thorn leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. "I'm just getting started. You paid for a boyfriend, Cleo. You're getting the full experience." I looked at him, terrified and thrilled. I had created a monster, and God help me, I didn't want him to stop. Chapter 6. The ceremony was a blur. I stood at the altar in my peach dress, holding Tilly's bouquet, but my eyes kept drifting to the second pew. Thorn was sitting there, looking like a dark storm cloud in a room full of pastels. He wasn't watching the bride. He wasn't watching the groom. He was watching me. Every time our eyes met, he held my gaze until I was the one who had to look away, my heart hammering against my ribs. He is good, I thought. He is really good at this acting thing. After the I do's, the reception moved to the country club. It was open bar time, which meant Preston was about to become insufferable. I was grabbing a glass of champagne when I felt a hand on my waist, a large, warm hand. "You survived," Thorne murmured against my hair. "Barely," I sighed, leaning into him before I remembered it was fake. I stiffened. "Okay, phase 2. The reception. Just stick close, look menacing, and try not to eat all the shrimp." "Cleo." I froze. Preston walked up, holding a whiskey sour. He looked Thorne up and down with a sneer that showed off his veneered teeth. "So," Preston drawled, "this is the guy. A mechanic." I asked around. "Someone saw him parked at that biker dive bar last night." Thorne didn't move. He didn't defend himself. He just stared at Preston with a boredom that was more insulting than a slap. "Yes," I said, lifting my chin. "He's a mechanic. He works with his hands. It's honest work, Preston, unlike whatever it is you do with hedge funds." Preston laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "Honest work. It's blue collar, Cleo. I have a Harvard MBA. I drive a Porsche. You're 32. I expected you to settle, but I didn't think you'd scrape the bottom of the barrel." He looked at Thorne. "Tell me, grease monkey, can you even afford the suit you're wearing, or is it a rental?" The air around Thorne changed. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Thorne took a step forward. He was half a foot taller than Preston and about 50 pounds heavier in pure muscle. "It's bespoke, Italian silk, and I bought it this morning, cash." He leaned down, invading Preston's personal space. "And as for scraping the bottom of the barrel," Thorne's voice dropped to a low growl that vibrated in my chest. "Cleo didn't settle, she upgraded. Because while you were busy buying a degree to prove you're a man, I was built like a man." Preston took a stumble back, looking terrified. "Now," Thornton said, straightening his cuffs, "walk away, before I confuse your face for a broken engine and decide to dismantle it." Chapter 7. Preston practically ran away. I stared at Thorne, my mouth slightly open. Dismantle it? It felt appropriate. Thorne shrugged, taking a sip of my champagne. "Did I overstep?" "You terrified him," I whispered. Then a grin spread across my face. It was the hottest thing I've ever seen. Thorne's eyes darkened. "Careful, Cleo, or I might think you actually like me." We sat down for dinner. I was placed at the head table with the family. Thorne, because he was my +1, was seated right next to me. My mother was watching us like a hawk. "So, Thorne," Mom said, picking at her salad, "Cleo tells us you work with motorcycles." "I build them," Thorne lied smoothly. "Custom engineering." "Oh, how niche." She turned to me. "Cleo, don't you think your dress is a bit tight? It's pulling at the seams." I felt the familiar sting of shame. "It's the size Tilly ordered, Mom. I didn't—" Suddenly, I was moving. Thorne had reached out, wrapped an arm around my waist, and pulled me, chair and all, closer to him until our thighs were pressed together. He didn't look at my mom. He looked at me, his gaze sweeping over the dress. "The dress isn't tight," Thorne announced to the table, his voice loud enough to carry. "It fits her perfectly. In fact, I've been struggling to keep my hands off her all day because of how incredible she looks in it." My aunt gasped. My dad choked on his water. Thorne lifted my hand to his lips, kissing my fingers one by one, watching my mother the whole time. "Cleo is the most breathtaking creature in this room," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Anyone who says otherwise needs to get their eyes checked. My mother's mouth snapped shut. Under the table, I kicked his shin. Ouch, he muttered, not breaking character. Too much, I hissed through a fake smile. She stopped talking, didn't she? He whispered back, resting his hand possessively on my knee. I looked at my mother, who was now quietly eating her salad. He was right. It worked. And having his heavy, warm hand on my leg, that was working for me too.
Chapter 8. The reception was winding down. The DJ was playing terrible 80s music, and people were dancing. I escaped to the balcony for fresh air. You stole my thunder. I turned around. Tilly was standing there, in her massive white gown, looking annoyed. What? I asked. Thorn, Tilly said, crossing her arms. Everyone is talking about him. Who is that guy? He's so hot. Look how much he loves Cleo. It's my wedding, Cleo. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't really. I can't help it if he's charismatic. He's scary, Tilly corrected. The way he looks at you, it's intense. Chad doesn't look at me like that. There was a wobble in her voice. Jealousy. For the first time in my life, my perfect sister was jealous of me. He's just protective, I said. Thorn stepped out onto the balcony. He had discarded his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms that looked like they could crush boulders. Is everything okay? He asked, moving to stand immediately behind me. He radiated heat. Tilly looked at him, then at Chad, who was currently doing the chicken dance inside. Fine, Tilly huffed. Just try not to make a scene during the cake cutting. She stormed off. Thorn watched her go, then wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on top of my head. Did she upset you? He asked, his voice low. No. I leaned back against his hard chest and closed my eyes. She was jealous. She said Chad doesn't look at her the way you look at me. Thorn tightened his hold. That's because Chad sees a wife. I see my whole world. My heart skipped a beat. Thorn, I warned, that line isn't in the contract. I'm improvising. But he didn't let go.
Chapter 9. The wedding was over. We survived. Thorn drove me home on his motorcycle. The ride was electric. My arms wrapped around his waist, the wind in my hair, his solid back protecting me from the world. He walked me to my apartment door. Well, I said, unlocking the door, you were incredible. Truly. My mom is terrified of you, my sister is jealous, and Preston is traumatized. Best $500 I ever spent. Thorn leaned against the doorframe. He looked tired, but his eyes were still alert. Get some rest, Cleo. Goodbye, Thorn, I said, feeling a strange pang of sadness. Good night, he corrected. I went to sleep thinking I'd never see him again. I woke up the next morning to the sound of metal clanking. I shot out of bed, grabbed a baseball bat, and crept into the kitchen. Thorn was under my sink. He was lying on his back, half inside the cabinet. He wasn't wearing the tuxedo anymore. He was wearing jeans and a tight black t-shirt that was currently riding up, showing a strip of tanned, muscular stomach. Thorn? I shrieked, lowering the bat. What are you doing? How did you get in? He slid out from under the sink and sat up, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. You gave me a key last night, in case of emergencies, and your sink has been dripping for 3 hours. It was annoying me. I gave you a key because I was tipsy, and the contract is over. The wedding is done. The faucet needed a washer, he said, standing up. He filled the room. And your front door lock is flimsy. I fixed that too. You fixed my lock? I replaced it with a deadbolt. You live in a bad neighborhood, Cleo. I stared at him.
He slept over? Or he came back? Why are you still here? He walked over to the fridge, opened it, and frowned at the contents, old yogurt and wine. He said, "Because the job isn't done."
Chapter 10. The job is done, I insisted, marching into my bedroom and grabbing my purse. I came back and slapped the envelope of cash onto the counter. $500, as agreed. Thank you for your services. You can go now. Thorn looked at the envelope like it was a napkin. He didn't pick it up. Your mother called you at 8 a.m. How do you know that? I answered your phone, he said. You what? She asked if I was still here, Thorn said, leaning against the counter and crossing his arms. I told her I was making you breakfast. She sounded impressed. She invited us to a barbecue next weekend. I groaned, putting my face in my hands. You were supposed to be a weekend fling. Now I have to fake date you for another week? The contract said until the family pressure subsided, Thorn quoted. It hasn't subsided. It's just shifted. If I leave now, they'll say I dumped you. You'll be the spinster again. I looked up at him. He was right. Damn him. I can't afford you for another week, I said quietly. I'm broke, Thorn. This 500 is it. Thorn reached out and pushed the envelope back toward me. I don't want your money, Cleo. Then why are you doing this? I asked, frustrated. Why are you fixing my sink and answering my mom's calls? You're a mechanic. Shouldn't you be at work? Thorn's eyes softened. He reached out and tucked a messy curl behind my ear, a gesture that was becoming dangerously familiar. Let's just say I have some vacation time, he lied, and maybe I don't like seeing people get bullied, even by their own mothers. So you're doing this out of pity? I asked, my pride bristling. No, he said. His voice dropped to that rumble that made my knees weak. I'm doing it because I want to. Keep the money. Buy some real food. He turned and walked toward the door. I'll pick you up at 6 for dinner. Wear something comfortable. I didn't agree to dinner, I yelled after him. It's part of the package, he called back. See you at 6. The door clicked shut, the new, heavy deadbolt clicking solidly. I stared at the envelope. I had hired a fake boyfriend, but somehow I felt like I had accidentally adopted a bodyguard, a very large, very bossy bodyguard who smelled like trouble. Chapter 11. Thorn picked me up at 6 o'clock on the dot. I opened the door expecting him to see him in his leather jacket or grease-stained t-shirt. Instead, he was wearing a dark navy button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to the elbows and dark jeans that fit him criminally well. He looked like the cover of a romance novel about a rugged billionaire who leaves the city to chop wood, which, ironically, was half true. You cleaned up again, I said, leaning against the doorframe. I thought mechanics lived in coveralls. I have a life outside the garage, Cleo, he said, his eyes sweeping over my jeans and sweater. You look nice. Comfortable. Comfortable is code for not trying hard, I muttered, locking the new deadbolt behind me. Comfortable means you aren't wearing that peach abomination, he corrected, offering me his arm. Let's go. We didn't take the bike. We walked. The evening air was crisp, and the city lights were just starting to flicker on. He took me to a small Italian place a few blocks away. It wasn't fancy, red checkered tablecloths, candles stuck in old wine bottles, but the smell of garlic and basil was heavenly. I'm paying for my half, I announced as we sat down. And don't pry that I'm the man routine. I have $18 in my wallet, and I intend to spend exactly 9 of them. Thorn looked at the menu, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Understood. You can buy the garlic bread. The date, and it felt alarmingly like a real date, was dangerous. Thorn asked questions, real questions. He wanted to know why I became a designer, because I like fixing broken spaces. He wanted to know why I stayed in this city.
stubbornness. He listened with an intensity that made me feel like I was the only person in the universe. In return, I tried to pry into his life. So, Thorn. No last name, no history, just a guy who fixes bikes and wears custom-made suits to weddings. Are you a spy? A hitman? A bored prince in hiding? He took a sip of his wine, his gray-gold eyes locking onto mine over the rim of the glass. "I'm just a man who knows what he wants," he said cryptically. "And what do you want?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He reached across the table, his thumb brushing my knuckles. The contact sent a jolt of electricity straight to my core. "I want to make sure you eat something other than dry wedding chicken." He deflected smoothly, but the way he looked at me said something else entirely. It said, "You." When the check came, I slapped my crumpled $10 bill on the table before he could reach for his wallet. "My share," I declared triumphantly. Thorn looked at the bill, then at me. He looked like he wanted to argue, to pull out a black credit card and buy the whole restaurant, but he stopped himself. He respected my pride. "Fair enough," he said. He was perfect. He was frustratingly, confusingly perfect, and that terrified me more than anything.
We decided to walk the long way back to my apartment to burn off the pasta. The streets were quieter now, shadows stretching long under the streetlights. Thorn was walking on the street side of the sidewalk, a habit I noticed he always kept. He was relaxed, his hands in his pockets, but his head was constantly swiveling, scanning the alleys and rooftops. "You're twitchy," I noted, expecting a turf war. "Just habit," he rasped. We turned the corner toward my building, cutting through a wider alley that served as a shortcut. "Well, well, well!" The voice echoed off the brick walls. I froze. I knew that voice. It was the voice of a man who thought wearing boat shoes made him a deity. Preston stepped out from the shadows. He wasn't alone. 3 other men were with him, large, thick-necked guys wearing cheap leather jackets and holding baseball bats. They looked like they had been hired from a catalog titled Thugs R Us. "Preston," I hissed, stepping closer to Thorn. "What are you doing? Are you insane?" Preston smirked, adjusting his silk tie. He looked confident, probably because he had backup. "I didn't appreciate being disrespected at the wedding, Cleo, and I certainly didn't appreciate your mechanic threatening me." He gestured to the thugs. "I thought it was time we taught him a lesson about social hierarchy. You can't just talk to a Harvard MBA that way." Thorn didn't move. He didn't tense up. He actually sighed, a sound of deep, profound boredom. "Harvard," Thorn deadpanned. "You really lead with that, don't you?" "Get him," Preston ordered, pointing a manicured finger at Thorn. "Run, Thorn," I screamed, grabbing my purse to use as a weapon. "I have pepper spray. I'll hold them off." Thorn looked down at me, amused. "Hold my jacket," he said calmly, shucking off his navy shirt to reveal a white undershirt that clung to his chest. He handed me the shirt. "Thorn!" I screamed as the first thug swung a bat. Thorn didn't even shift his stance. He caught the bat with one hand. Thwack! He caught it. Mid-swing. The thug looked confused. Thorn looked annoyed. "Force equals mass times acceleration," Thorn lectured in a monotone voice. "You have mass, but you lack acceleration." He twisted the bat out of the guy's hand and tossed it aside like a toothpick. Then he shoved the guy. The thug flew. Literally flew. He landed in a pile of garbage bags 10 feet away. The other 2 rushed him. Thorn moved like water. He ducked a punch, grabbed the second guy by the belt, and hoisted him into the air, depositing him gently but firmly inside an open dumpster. The third guy took one look at his flying friends, dropped his bat, and ran. Thorn turned to Preston. Preston was trembling, backing up until he hit the brick wall. "Physics," Thorn said, walking slowly toward him.
It's a fascinating subject. Did they teach that at Harvard, or was it an elective?
Chapter 13. Preston was on the ground, whimpering. Thorn hadn't even touched him. He had just loomed over him until Preston's survival instincts finally kicked in and he curled into a ball. "We're leaving," Thorn announced, turning his back on my ex. He grabbed his shirt from my shaking hands and draped it over his shoulder. "You," I stammered, running to catch up with his long strides. "You just threw a man into a dumpster?" "He was recyclable," he grunted. We made it back to my apartment in silence. My heart was racing, the adrenaline still spiking in my blood. When we got inside, I turned on the lights and really looked at him. "You're bleeding," I gasped. There was a small cut on his forearm, likely from a rusty buckle on one of the thug's jackets. A thin line of dark blood welled up. "It's a scratch," he dismissed, heading for the door. "I'm fine. Go to sleep, Cleo." "Sit down," I ordered, pointing to the couch. Thorn paused. He looked at the door, then at me. "Cleo, sit down." He sat. The couch groaned under his weight. I ran to the bathroom and grabbed my first aid kit, which consisted mostly of expired antiseptic and cartoon Band-Aids. I knelt between his spread knees, uncapping the hydrogen peroxide. "This might sting," I whispered. I dabbed the cut. Thorn didn't flinch. He watched me, his gaze heavy and unreadable. Being this close to him was overwhelming. I could smell the adrenaline on him, mixed with that forest rain scent. I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Why didn't you run?" he asked, quietly. "In the alley. You tried to fight them. They were going to hurt you. You were outnumbered." "I'm never outnumbered by men like that," he murmured. "But you stood in front of me. You weigh 120 pounds soaking wet, and you tried to shield me." I looked up. His face was inches from mine. His eyes were searching mine, looking for something. "You're my fake boyfriend." I tried to joke, though my voice trembled. "I have to protect my investment." Thorn didn't laugh. He reached out, his large hand cupping my jaw. His thumb traced my lower lip. "You are dangerous, Cleo Vane. More dangerous than any man in that alley." My breath hitched. "Thorn," he leaned in. I thought he was going to kiss me. I wanted him to kiss me. But he pulled back abruptly, standing up. "All patched up," he said, his voice rough. "Lock the door behind me."
Chapter 14. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Thorn catching that baseball bat. The ease of it, the terrifying strength. He wasn't just a mechanic. Mechanics didn't talk about physics while fighting three men. Mechanics didn't move like apex predators. And he wasn't just a fake boyfriend anymore. Not to me. But he was dangerous. Violence hung around him like a second skin. And I was Cleo Vane, the girl who cried when she killed a spider. We were different species. The next morning, I called him. "We need to talk," I said. "I'm outside." Of course he was. I went downstairs. He was leaning against his motorcycle, drinking coffee. He looked fresh, rested, and impossibly handsome. "Here." He handed me a coffee. 2 sugars, oat milk. He remembered my order from the wedding breakfast. "Thorn," I said, ignoring the coffee, "I can't do this anymore." His expression went blank. "Do what?" "This," I gestured between us. "The fake dating, the bodyguarding, throwing people into dumpsters. It's too much." He set his coffee down on the bike seat. "Did I scare you last night?" "Yes," I exclaimed. "No, maybe. You didn't scare me, but the situation scared me. Preston is crazy, but you were lethal, Thorn. I saw it. You didn't just fight them, you dismantled them. Who are you?" "I told you. I'm a man who protects what's his." "But I'm not yours," I argued, my voice cracking. "I'm a client, a broke client who can't afford to get dragged into a turf war or whatever violent life you lead. I'm just a designer,
I want a boring life. I want safety. I took a breath, steeling myself. I'm firing you. For real this time. Go back to your life, Thorn. Let me go back to mine. I expected him to argue. I expected him to invoke the contract. Instead, he looked at me with a sadness that gutted me. You think you're safer without me? Yes, I lied. He looked at me for a long moment, memorizing my face. Fine, he said. If that's what you want. He got on his bike. He didn't look back. He revved the engine and roared away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk holding a cup of oat milk coffee, feeling like I had just made the biggest mistake of my life.
Chapter 15. 3 days passed. They were the longest 3 days of my life. My apartment felt empty. My sink started dripping again, and every time I heard it, I wanted to cry. I walked to work looking over my shoulder, expecting Preston or his goons, but no one bothered me. It was quiet. Too quiet. On Friday night, a cold snap hit the city. The temperature plummeted, freezing rain turning the sidewalks into glass. I was walking home from the grocery store, shivering in my coat. I turned onto my street and stopped. There was a figure sitting on my front stoop. A large, dark figure huddled against the cold. My heart leapt into my throat. Thorn? I hurried closer. It wasn't Thorn. It was just a shadow cast by the trash cans. I let out a shaky breath, unlocking my door. I was losing my mind. I walked into my apartment and froze. The window was open. The fire escape window. I had locked it. I was sure I had locked it. Hello, Cleo. I spun around. Sitting in my armchair, in the dark, was Thorn. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was wearing tactical gear, black cargo pants, a heavy jacket, and combat boots. He looked exhausted. He looked terrifying. Thorn? I whispered, dropping my grocery bag. What are you doing here? I fired you. He stood up. I know. And I stayed away for 3 days. He walked toward me. He didn't stop until he was looming over me, blocking out the light from the street lamp outside. But then the temperature dropped, he said, his voice rough. It's freezing outside, Cleo. So? I stammered. You have a home. Go there. I couldn't, he admitted, because I remembered. Remembered what? 3 years ago, he said intensely. I was freezing, I was bleeding, and you didn't leave me. You gave me a shawl. You kept me warm. He reached out, grabbing my cold hands in his warm ones. I tried to stay away. I tried to respect your wishes. But there are wolves circling Cleo, real ones, and I am not leaving you out in the cold, not when you're the one who saved me from it. I stared at him confused. Wolves? What are you talking about? Thorn didn't answer. He turned his head toward the window, his body tensing, a low growl rumbling in his chest that sounded entirely unhuman. They're here, he whispered. Then the window shattered.
Chapter 16. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. Shards of my living room window sprayed across the floor like diamonds. I screamed, covering my face, but Thorn was already moving. He didn't panic. He didn't flinch. He moved with a speed that blurred the edges of my vision. Before the glass even settled, he had shoved me behind the kitchen island, his body acting as a massive human shield. Stay down, he roared, his voice shaking the walls. 2 men climbed through the broken window. They weren't like Preston's hired goons. These men were massive, moving with a feral, jerky grace. Their eyes reflected the streetlights in a way that looked wrong, luminous and predatory. They wore ragged clothes and smelled like wet dog and copper. We found him, one of them hissed, sniffing the air. The king is playing mechanic in a shoebox. Thorn stepped out from the kitchen. He looked terrifying in his tactical gear, his hands curled into fists at his sides. You made a mistake coming here, Thorn said, his voice dropping to a subsonic boom. This is neutral territory. You are violating the treaty. We don't care about your treaties, Blackwood,
We came for your head." They lunged. I watched, paralyzed, peeking over the counter. Thorn met them head on. He caught the knife wielder's wrist, twisting it with a sickening crack. The man screamed, dropping the weapon. Thorn spun, landing a kick to the man's chest that sent him flying back through the broken window and onto the fire escape. The second man tackled Thorn. They crashed into my coffee table, splintering wood everywhere. Thorn didn't fight like a boxer. He fought like an animal. He bit. He clawed. He slammed the man's head into the floor with a force that cracked the floorboards. "Cleo, go!" Thorn yelled, struggling to keep the man pinned. "Get to the motorcycle." "I'm not leaving you," I screamed, grabbing a heavy cast iron skillet from the drying rack. I ran forward and swung the skillet with all my might. Clang! While the attacker was distracted, I hit him right on the base of the skull where the bone is thinnest. He slumped over, unconscious. Thorn shoved the body off him and stood up, chest heaving. He looked at me, then at the skillet, wide-eyed. "You have a skillet?" "It's Le Creuset. It's heavy. We have to move." Thorn grabbed my hand, his grip bruising. "There are more of them. We need a public place, somewhere with witnesses. They won't shift in front of humans." "Shift?" I asked, stumbling as he dragged me toward the door. "Shift into what?" "Later," he growled. "Run now."
Chapter 17. We ran. We left my apartment, now a crime scene, and sprinted 3 blocks to Daisy's Diner. It was the only place open 24/7, glowing like a neon beacon in the dark night. We burst through the doors, panting, wild-eyed. The diner was half full of truck drivers and college students. The smell of bacon and coffee hit me, grounding me. "Table for 2. Thorn barked at the terrified waitress, dragging me to a booth in the back corner. He sat me down, sliding in next to me instead of across. He kept his body angled toward the door, shielding me. "Thorn," I whispered, my hands shaking as I gripped the laminated menu. "You shouldn't have worn that bespoke suit in public, Thorn. It leaves a paper trail. Or pictures of the happy couple at the wedding are all over the internet." Who were those men? They called you Blackwood. They called you king. What is going on? Thorn wiped a streak of blood from his cheek. He looked at me with an intensity that made my stomach flip. "I told you," he said roughly. "I have enemies. Rich enemies. Mechanics don't have enemies who climb through windows with knives," I hissed. "You are lying to me. Are you a mob boss? A drug lord?" Before he could answer, the bell above the door chimed. Thorn stiffened. A low vibration started in his chest, a growl. I looked at the door. A man walked in. He was tall, wearing a long trench coat. He had a shaved head and a scar running from his eye to his jaw. He didn't look at the waitress. He looked straight at us. Behind him, 3 more men entered. They locked the diner door and flipped the sign to closed. The patrons went silent. "Varric," Thorn said, standing up slowly. "Thorn?" The scarred man smiled, revealing teeth that looked too sharp. "You look domestic, hiding behind a human female. How the mighty have fallen." "Leave her out of this," Thorn warned, stepping in front of me. "This is between alphas." "Oh, she's part of it now," Varric laughed. "She smells like you. Vanilla and fear." Varric signaled his men. They began to change. Their bones popped, their jaws elongated. Hair sprouted from their skin. I screamed. The truck driver screamed. In seconds, 3 massive gray wolves stood in the diner, snarling, drool dripping onto the linoleum. "Thorn," I whimpered, clutching his arm. They're monsters." Thorn didn't look back. He shoved me behind him, toward the kitchen doors. "I need you to run, Cleo," he said, his voice strangely calm. "Go out the back." "They'll kill you." "They can try."
he said. One of the wolves lunged. I didn't run. I grabbed the pot of hot coffee from the nearby warmer and threw the scalding liquid straight into the wolf's face.
Chapter 18. The wolf yelped, a high dog-like sound, and scrambled back, pawing at its face. "Run!" I screamed at Thorn. But Thorn didn't run. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a tragic, desperate apology. "Forgive me," he whispered. Then he turned to the wolves. He ripped his tactical vest open. He tore his shirt off. "Close your eyes, Cleo," he roared. I didn't close them. I couldn't. I watched as the man I had fake dated, the man who fixed my sink and threw my ex into a dumpster, fell to his knees. His spine arched, cracking audibly. His skin rippled. A scream tore from his throat, shifting into a guttural howl that shattered the diner windows. Black fur exploded from his skin. His snout pushed out, teeth lengthening into daggers. He grew and grew and grew until his clothes shredded and fell away. Standing in the middle of the diner wasn't a man. It was a monster, a massive midnight black wolf, easily twice the size of the others. He stood 7 feet tall on his hind legs before dropping to all fours, his claws gouging the tile floor. His eyes, those distinctive gray-gold eyes, glowed with lethal power. The rogue wolves hesitated. They looked small compared to him. Thorn roared, a sound that wasn't of this earth, and lunged. It wasn't a fight. It was a massacre. Thorn was faster, stronger, deadlier. He caught the first wolf by the throat and tossed him through the window. He swiped the second one aside like a rag doll. Varric, the scarred man, had shifted too, a large brown wolf. He attacked Thorn from behind. Thorn spun, snapping his jaws. He pinned Varric to the counter, snarling in his face. Varric whimpered, exposing his throat in submission. Thorn held him there for a breath, establishing dominance, then shoved him away. "Leave," his posture screamed. The surviving rogues scrambled out of the broken windows, tails tucked between their legs. Silence fell over the destroyed diner. The truck drivers were hiding under tables. The waitress was sobbing in the kitchen, and I was standing there, holding an empty coffee pot, shaking so hard my teeth rattled. The black wolf turned slowly. He was huge, terrifying, covered in blood that wasn't his. He took a step toward me.
Chapter 19. He huffed, steam rising from his nostrils. He stepped closer, his massive paws silent on the debris-strewn floor. I backed up until I hit the wall. "Stay back," I whispered, holding the coffee pot like a weapon. "Stay away from me." The wolf stopped. He whined, a high, sad sound that didn't match his nightmare appearance. He lowered his head, trying to make himself smaller. He looked up at me with those gray-gold eyes, and suddenly the memory hit me like a freight train. The alley, 3 years ago, the strayed dog, the ham sandwich, the eyes. "It's you," I breathed, the coffee pot slipping from my numb fingers and shattering on the floor. "The dog in the alley, it was you." The wolf dipped his head in a nod. "You're not a mechanic," I said, my voice rising in hysteria. "You're not a bodyguard. You're a werewolf." My brain tried to process the last 2 weeks. The custom engineering, the strength, the way he smelled like a forest, the way he tracked me. "You lied to me. This whole time. You let me hire you. You let me think I was helping you." The wolf took another step, reaching out as if to nuzzle my hand. "No!" I screamed, shrinking away. The rejection hit him visibly. He flinched. The adrenaline that had been keeping me upright suddenly vanished. The room started to spin. The smell of ozone and wet fur was overwhelming. "I hired a monster," I murmured, the darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision. The floor rushed up to meet me. The last thing I felt was soft, thick fur catching me before I hit the ground. Chapter 20. I woke up in a bed that cost more than my life.
The sheets were silk, the pillows were clouds, and the ceiling was painted with a mural of the night sky. I shot up, gasping. I wasn't in my apartment. I wasn't in the diner. I was in a room the size of a ballroom, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. "You're awake." I whipped my head around. Thorn was sitting in a chair by the window. He was human again. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a fresh t-shirt, but he looked wrecked. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair messy. He looked like he hadn't moved in hours. "Where am I?" I croaked. "My home," he said quietly. "The penthouse. It's the safest place in the city. The security system is robust." I pulled the sheets up to my chin. "The wolves?" "Gone," he said. "They won't come back. I made sure of it." "You're a wolf," I stated. It sounded insane saying it out loud. "I am a lichen," he corrected gently, "and the alpha of the Onyx Ridge Pack." I laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Of course. You're not just a monster, you're the king of the monsters, and I paid you $500 to hold my purse?" Thorn flinched. He stood up and walked toward the bed, stopping when I shrank back against the headboard. "I wanted to tell you," he said, "but I knew you would run. Humans, they don't handle our world well." "I'm handling it great," I said, pointing to my shaking hands. "I'm doing fantastic, Thorn. I just found out my fake boyfriend eats deer for breakfast." "I eat omelets," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "And I took the job because I owed you. You saved my life, Cleo. That night in the alley, I would have died without you." "So this was pity?" I asked, tears stinging my eyes. "A charity case for the poor human who fed the dog?" "No," he growled, the alpha tone slipping out. "It was never pity. It was gratitude. And then it was obsession. I couldn't stay away." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something gray and folded. He placed it on the bed between us. It was my wool shawl. It was clean, folded perfectly. "I kept it," he whispered. "For 3 years. It smells like you." I stared at the shawl. I felt a crack in my chest. It was too much. The lies, the danger, the intensity. "I want to go home," I said quietly. "Cleo, your apartment is a crime scene. It's not safe." "I don't care," I said, swinging my legs out of bed. "I want to go to a hotel. I want to be away from you. I can't do this." Thorn looked at me. He looked like I had just stabbed him, but he nodded. "Okay," he said hoarsely. "I'll have Xavier drive you. But take the shawl. It's cold outside."
Chapter 21. The hotel room was beige. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige art. It was perfectly safe and utterly soulless. I had been there for a week. Xavier, Thorn's assistant, who I now knew was a beta wolf, which explained his nervous energy, had set me up in the presidential suite of the Ritz. He had also stationed 2 security consultants outside my door. I was safe. I was free of the monster. So why was I so miserable? I sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping the gray wool shawl around my shoulders. It still smelled like him. Cedar, rain, and raw power. I missed him. I missed the way he loomed over me. I missed his dry humor. I missed feeling like the most important person in the room. "You're an idiot, Cleo," I told the empty room. "He's a werewolf. He eats raw meat. You can't date a werewolf." There was a knock on the door. I flinched. "Who's it?" "Room service?" a voice called. I opened the door. It wasn't room service. It was Xavier, holding a small wooden box. "He told me not to disturb you, but he writes a lot when he's sad." Xavier handed me the box and fled. I sat on the floor and opened it. There were no diamonds, no checks, no car keys. It was filled with letters, handwritten on thick, expensive stationery. I picked up the first one. His handwriting was jagged and bold, like scratches on parchment. "Cleo, I know you are afraid.
You saw the beast and you ran. That is a survival instinct. I don't blame you. But you need to know the beast only exists to protect you. Before you, my wolf was just rage. With you, he is settled. You are the anchor. I am not asking you to come back to the violence. I am asking you to let me show you the rest, the part that isn't blood and teeth. I will wait, even if it takes 100 years. Thorn. I read them all. Letters about how he felt when he first saw me in the bar. Letters about how funny he thought I was when I threw the skillet. Letters explaining what a mate was. Not a prisoner, but a soul mirror. By the last letter, I was crying. He wasn't trying to buy me back. He was courting me, the old-fashioned way, with words and patience. I wiped my eyes and stood up. I grabbed my coat. I was done with beige. Chapter 22. I called Xavier. 20 minutes later, a black SUV picked me up. We didn't go to the Obsidian Tower. We drove out of the city, past the suburbs, into the deep, dense forests of the state park. Where are we going? I asked. Home. Xavier smiled. The real home. We pulled onto a gravel road that wound up a mountain. The trees here were ancient, their branches interlocking to form a tunnel. Finally, the car stopped. Thorn was waiting. He was leaning against a wooden fence, wearing flannel and jeans. He looked rugged, human, and devastatingly handsome. He straightened when he saw me. He didn't rush forward. He waited, letting me come to him. I stepped out of the car. The air here was cleaner, sharper. You read the letters, he said softly. You have terrible handwriting, I said, my voice shaking. It looks like a chicken scratched it. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that made my stomach flip. Claws aren't made for pens. You said you wanted to show me the rest, I said, hugging my arms. Show me. He held out his hand. I hesitated for a heartbeat. I looked at the hand that had crushed a baseball bat. Then I looked at his eyes, the eyes that had watched me sleep in the hospital bed. I took his hand. He led me past the fence into the woods. It gets dark here early, he murmured. Watch your step. As we walked deeper into the forest, the sun dipped below the horizon. Thorn, I can't see, I whispered, clutching his hand tighter. Look up, he said. I looked. The forest wasn't dark. It was glowing. Patches of moss on the trees were emitting a soft, bioluminescent blue light. Fireflies, thousands of them, danced in the air like floating stars. Flowers on the forest floor glowed with a faint purple pulse. It was magic. Pure, unadulterated magic. It's the magic of the Pack lands, Thorn explained quietly. Nature responds to us here. It's not scary, Cleo. It's life. I spun around, taking it in. It's beautiful. It pales in comparison to you, he whispered. I turned to him. In the soft blue light, he didn't look like a monster. He looked like a guardian. This is your world? I asked. This is our world, if you want it. Chapter 23. We walked until the trees broke into a clearing. I expected a cave or a fortress. Instead, I saw a village. There were log cabins with smoke curling from stone chimneys. There were gardens. There were string lights hung between trees. And there were people. Families. Kids running around chasing puppies. No, wolf pups. This is the Pack? I asked, stunned. It looks like a summer camp. We aren't monsters, Cleo, Thorn said, guiding me down the path. We are a community. We protect our own. As we entered the village, the chatter stopped. People turned. They saw Thorn and their expressions filled with respect. Then they saw me. I braced myself for judgment, for rejection. I was human. I was weak. An older woman with silver hair walked up to us. She looked stern, like a librarian who didn't tolerate noise. She looked me up and down. Then she smiled warmly. "You must be the girl with the ham sandwich." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Thorn never shuts up about the ham sandwich." The woman laughed, patting my cheek. "I'm Martha. I run the nursery." Suddenly, I was surrounded. People weren't bowing in fear. They were welcoming me. Kids were tugging on my coat. "Is she the queen?" a little girl asked, holding a stuffed wolf toy. Thorn knelt down, bringing his face level with the child. "Yes," Thorn said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. "She is the queen, so you have to be very nice to her, or she won't draw you a picture." The little girl gasped. "You draw?" Yes," I stammered. "Can you draw my wolf?" she asked, thrusting the toy at me. I looked at Thorn. He was watching me with such naked hope it hurt. I knelt down next to him. "I can draw your wolf," I told the girl. I looked at the people around us, smiling, normal, kind people who just happened to turn into animals. They weren't scary. "They like me," I whispered to Thorn. "They love you," he corrected. "Because you saved their alpha. You gave them their king back." He stood up and offered me his hand again. "Come, dinner is ready, and I promise it's cooked."
Chapter 24. Dinner was a communal affair at a long wooden table under the stars. The food was incredible. Roast venison, grilled vegetables, homemade bread. I sat next to Thorn, his thigh pressing against mine. Every time he laughed, a deep rumbling sound I hadn't heard enough of, I felt a thrill. Preston would never have sat here. He would have sneered at the dirt, at the mismatched plates, at the loud laughter. But Thorn was at home. He was a king, but he was also a brother, a son, a leader. After dinner, we sat by a massive bonfire. "You fit in," Thorn murmured, his arm draped over my shoulders to ward off the chill. "I'm surprisingly okay with the lack of Wi-Fi," I admitted. "Cleo." He turned to me, his expression turning serious. The firelight danced in his gold-flecked eyes. "The contract," he said. "The fake dating. It's over." My heart dropped. "Oh, right. I guess I owe you more than $500 now." "Stop," he growled softly. "I'm trying to tell you something." He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. "When I met you at the bar, I thought I was just paying a debt. I thought I could pretend to be your boyfriend, scare off your ex, and walk away." He leaned closer. "But I took the job too seriously. I didn't act, Cleo. When I told your mother you were breathtaking, I meant it. When I threw Preston into the dumpster, I enjoyed it. Because he looked at you like you were ordinary. And you are the most extraordinary thing I have ever found." I felt tears prick my eyes again. "Thorn, I don't want to be your fake boyfriend," he said intensely. "I don't want a contract. I want the real thing. I want the arguments about the dishes. I want to fix your sink for the next 50 years. I want you to be mine." I looked at him. My master, my protector. "I'm messy," I warned him, a sob catching in my throat. "I have student loans. I snore sometimes." "I love your snore. It sounds like a purr." I laughed, leaning my forehead against his. "Okay," I whispered. "You're hired. For real this time." Chapter 25. The moment I said yes, the air around us changed. It crackled. Thorn didn't kiss me immediately. He stood up and pulled me with him, leading me away from the fire, toward a quiet ridge overlooking the valley. The moon was full, hanging heavy and white in the sky. "There is one more thing," Thorn said, his voice tight with restraint. "The mate bond." "The thing that makes you obsessed?" I teased weakly. "The thing that binds our souls," he corrected. "Wolves, we don't just date, we claim. If I mark you, if I bite you, you become part of the pack. You gain our protection, our strength. You become the queen." He reached out, tracing the vein in my neck. His touch was scorching. "It is permanent, Cleo. There is no divorce in my world. If you let me mark you, you are stuck with me. Forever." I looked out at the valley, at the glowing forest, at the village below. Then I looked at Thorn. He had waited 3 years for me. He had fought for me. He loved me. I had spent my whole life waiting for a man who wouldn't ask me to change. Thorn didn't want me to change. He wanted to worship me exactly as I was. "Do it," I whispered. Thorn froze. "Are you sure?" "I don't want a temporary boyfriend," I said, stepping closer, wrapping my arms around his neck. "I want the king. Mark me, Thorn." He groaned, a low, animalistic sound of pure want. He pulled me against him, burying his face in the crook of my neck. He inhaled deeply, shuddering. "My queen," he rasped. Then he bit me. It wasn't painful like I expected. It was a sharp pinch followed by a rush of liquid heat, like whiskey flooding my veins. I gasped, clutching his shoulders. I felt it. I felt him. His emotions flooded my mind, an overwhelming tidal wave of love, relief, and fierce protective joy. I wasn't just Cleo Vane anymore. I was part of something ancient. He pulled back, licking the mark on my neck to seal it. "You're glowing," he whispered, looking at me with awe. I looked down at my hands. A faint, golden shimmer coated my skin. "I feel strong," I said, surprised. "You are," he grinned, sweeping me up into his arms. "You're an alpha's mate. Now, let's go home, and I believe we have a lot of real dating to catch up on."
Chapter 26. 3 months later, I walked down an aisle. It wasn't in a stuffy church. It wasn't surrounded by peach-colored tulle. I was walking barefoot on a path of moss in the heart of the Packlands. The bioluminescent forest was awake, the trees glowing with soft blue light, and thousands of fireflies acted as our confetti. "Stop fidgeting," Xavier whispered, walking beside me. He was acting as my man of honor because Tilly was currently too busy staring at the wolves, in human form, lining the aisle to focus. "I'm not fidgeting," I hissed. "I'm vibrating. There is a lot of magic in the air, Xavier." "That's just the king," Xavier grinned. "He's excited." I looked ahead. Thorn stood under a massive, ancient oak tree. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo this time. He was wearing a ceremonial tunic of deep charcoal and silver, looking like a warrior king from a fantasy novel. When his eyes met mine, everything else faded. The forest, the guests, the magic, it all blurred. My mother was sitting in the front row, looking terrified but impressed. She kept clutching her pearls every time a wolf howled in the distance. "He's very intense," I heard her whisper to my dad. "He owns half the state, Linda. Let him be intense." I reached the altar. Thorn didn't wait for the ceremony to start. He reached out and pulled me up the last step, his hands gripping my waist like he was afraid I might bolt. "You came," he breathed, as if there was any doubt. "I signed a contract," I teased, my voice thick with emotion. "Lifetime commitment, no refunds." "Good," he growled softly. The ceremony was simple. We didn't exchange rings, we exchanged vows of loyalty. "I, Thorn Blackwood, pledge my life, my pack, and my soul to you," he said, his voice ringing through the clearing. "You saved me when I was nothing. You warmed me when I was cold. I will burn the world before I let you shiver again." I wiped a tear from my cheek. "I, Cleo Vane, pledge to keep you grounded, to remind you that you're human, even when you're a wolf, and to never let you go hungry again." He kissed me then. It wasn't a polite wedding kiss, it was a claiming. And as the pack howled their approval to the moon, I knew I was finally home.
Chapter 27. 2 weeks after the wedding, we faced the final boss, the Vane family barbecue. "Do we have to go?" Thorn grumbled. We were in the back of his armored SUV. Thorn was wearing civilian clothes, dark jeans and a black t-shirt that cost more than my old car. "Yes," I said, fixing his collar, "my mother wants to show you off, and Tilly wants to ask you if you have any single brothers." "I have 3 generals," Thorn muttered. "They would eat her alive." We pulled up to my parents' suburban house. It looked comically small compared to the convoy of black SUVs Thorn traveled with now. The driveway was already full, and right in the center, taking up 2 spots, was a bright yellow Porsche. "Preston," I sighed. "Of course." Thorn's eyes narrowed. A dark, predatory smile spread across his face. "Xavier," Thorn said into the intercom. "Yes, sir." "Park the truck, right there." Thorn pointed to the spot directly behind the Porsche. "Sir, that will block him in," Xavier noted. "I know," Thorn purred. "Park it close." We stepped out of the car. The neighborhood went quiet. Thorn didn't just walk, he stalked. He kept a hand on the small of my back, guiding me up the driveway. My mother came running out holding a spatula. "Cleo, Thorn!" She looked at the SUVs, then at the neighbors watching from their windows. She was beaming. "You brought security?" "Standard protocol, Linda," Thorn said smoothly, charming her instantly. We walked into the backyard. Preston was holding a beer, holding court with my cousins. "Yeah, the market is volatile, but when you drive a car like mine, you don't worry about gas prices." He turned and saw us. His smile dropped. "Thorn," Preston nodded stiffly. "Cleo, I see you're still together." Thorn stepped forward, looming over Preston. The size difference was laughable. "Married, actually," Thorn corrected, holding up his hand where a simple, thick band of black metal rested, "and happily."
The barbecue was going surprisingly well. Thorn was charming my dad by talking about engine specs, and I was actually enjoying a hot dog without anyone asking why I was single. Then it was time to leave. Preston, eager to escape Thorn's presence, made a big show of saying goodbye. "Well, gotta run," Preston announced, swinging his keys. "The Porsche doesn't drive itself. 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, you know?" He looked at Thorn. "What are you driving today? Another bike?" Thorn smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had cornered a rabbit. "Something a bit sturdier," Thorn said. We all walked out to the driveway. Preston stopped. His jaw dropped. His bright yellow Porsche was pinned. Directly behind it, bumper to bumper, was Thorn's massive, matte black, military-grade armored truck. It looked like a tank. It dwarfed the sports car, making it look like a toy. The truck's tires were taller than the Porsche's roof. "My car!" Preston shrieked. "You blocked me in. That is a $100,000 machine." Thorn walked over to the truck. He didn't get in. He just leaned against the massive tire, crossing his arms. "I don't think I will," Thorn said calmly. "I think we're going to stay for dessert. Linda said there was pie." "You can't do this," Preston sputtered. "Do you know who I am?" Thorn stepped away from the truck. The air grew heavy. The playful husband vanished, replaced by the alpha king. "I know exactly who you are. You are the man who treated my wife like she was disposable. You are the man who thought a degree made you a king." Thorn patted the hood of the massive truck. "My valet parked my tank on your toy, Preston. Apologies, but you'll have to wait until I'm ready to leave, and I have a very big appetite for pie." Preston looked at the truck. He looked at Thorn. He looked at the security guard standing by with folded arms. He slumped. "Fine." I laughed. I couldn't help it. I grabbed Thorn's hand. "I love you," I whispered. "I know." He winked. "Now let's go get that pie." Chapter 29. Later that night, we were back at the penthouse.
The city lights twinkled below us through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I was sitting on the counter in the kitchen, eating leftover pie straight from the tin. Thorn was standing between my knees, his hands resting on my hips. "You were petty today," I teased, feeding him a forkful of cherry pie. "I was protective," he corrected, swallowing. "There is a difference." "You blocked a Porsche with a tank, Thorn. That is petty." He annoyed me. "And he looked at you." His expression sobered. He reached out, his thumb tracing the mark on my neck, the spot where he had claimed me. "Are you happy, Cleo? This life, the guards, the politics, the wolves, it's not the boring life you wanted." I put the fork down. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who had waited in the cold for me, the man who learned to love my snoring, the man who made me feel powerful. I didn't want a boring life. I just wanted a life where I didn't feel alone. And with you, I'm never alone. Thorn's eyes burned with gold fire. "Never," he vowed. "You are stuck with me." He leaned in, capturing my lips in a kiss that tasted of cherries and forever. He lifted me off the counter, carrying me toward the bedroom. "Thorn," I gasped, breaking the kiss. "The pie." "Forget the pie," he growled against my neck. "I'm still hungry." I laughed, wrapping my legs around his waist as he carried me into the dark. I paid $500 for a fake boyfriend. I got a king, and he was worth every penny.
Chapter 30. 6 months later. It was the first snowfall of the year. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of the penthouse, watching the city turn white. It looked exactly like the night I had found him in the alley 3 years ago. "You're brooding," a deep voice vibrated behind me. Thorn wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me back against his solid chest. He was warm, always so warm. "I'm not brooding," I smiled, leaning my head back on his shoulder. "I'm remembering. It's freezing out there." "It is," he agreed, resting his chin on my head. "Good thing I'm not stuck in an alley tonight." "Good thing," I whispered. He turned me around, his gray gold eyes searching mine. He looked happier now. The darkness that used to cling to him was gone, replaced with a quiet confidence. "I have something for you," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It looked old, wrinkled, and had a coffee stain on the corner. I gasped. It was the napkin from the Resty Sprocket, the one where I had scribbled our original fake boyfriend contract in red pen. 1. Devoted. 2. Minimal talking. 3. No touching. "I found this in your old purse when we were moving boxes," Thorn said. "You kept it." "I kept it as a reminder," I admitted, my cheeks flushing, "of how stupid I thought I could hire a king for $500. Thorn laughed, a low sound that vibrated through me. "I've made some edits," he said, handing me a pen. He flipped the napkin over. On the back, in his jagged, claw-like handwriting, he had written a new list. The new contract. 1. Devoted. Forever. 2. Maximum talking, even when you snore. 3. Constant touching. Mandatory. "It looks legally binding," I teased, fighting back tears. "It is," he growled playfully. "Pack law. No takebacks." He took the pen from my hand and tossed it on the table. Then he reached for the back of the sofa, picking up the gray wool shawl. The shawl. He wrapped it around my shoulders, pulling it tight, cocooning me in his scent and the memory of how we started. "You saved me with this shawl, Cleo. You warmed a monster, and you made me a man. I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to pay you back." "You don't owe me anything, Thorn.
I said, reaching up to cup his face. The debt is paid. We're even. No. He kissed me, slow and deep. I'm just getting started. He scooped me up into his arms, carrying me toward the fireplace where a warm fire was crackling. Where are we going? I laughed. To hold rule number 3, he murmured against my neck. Constant touching. I think I can agree to those terms. I smiled, burying my face in his neck. I paid the alpha to be my fake boyfriend. He took the job seriously. But as he laid me down by the fire, looking at me like he was my entire world, I knew the truth. He hadn't just taken the job, he had taken my heart, and I wasn't asking it back. The end.